The crisis is affecting 3.8 million children, many of whom have been subject to violations including forced recruitment into Boko Haram and being used as suicide bombers. Women and girls have been trafficked, raped, abducted and forcibly married. Young Amina Ali, who has only just been released, is testimony.
Your Excellency, Mr. President.
We are looking into the protection needs of IDPs, and specifically here we're looking into shelter, housing, food, access to health services and health care, access to education on the part of children, reproductive health care for women, protection against SGBV in relation to women and children. We're looking at livelihood issues as well as issues of employment for IDPs. Within that, we pay attention to special categories that are vulnerable, the elderly, for example, those that have disabilities, children and the education system, which has been devastated, and of course women, mostly who have been subjected to sexual violence, sexual exploitation, survival exploitation of their gender in most cases, and the measures that we need to take in order to provide adequate protection.
Currently, 26 formal camps have been opened by the government in Borno State to care for the humanitarian needs of internally displaced persons in the region. And this is in addition to the camps in Adamawa and Yobe states. The Humanitarian Response Agency report for 2013 shows that 155 aid workers died in the line of duty globally. Another 134 were kidnapped, with 171 seriously injured. NEMA outlined recent challenges that aid workers also face in Nigeria's northeast.
Just very recently, because of the successes again that has been recorded by the military, most areas have been liberated. There are challenges in those areas where we are looking at over 750,000 to 800,000 around those liberated communities. Therefore, new emerging challenges are always coming up. Very recently, we have a multi-sectoral assessment that was carried out in those liberated areas with a view to ascertaining the needs. And then we had a team that went and did an assessment, carried out the assessment, validated those assessments, and now we are in the process of bringing up the micro plan on how to deal with those needs that have been identified. Of course, the needs are enormous and it's very challenging, and I must say it's very overwhelming to say the least. But government at all levels is trying its best. The federal government, through the National Emergency Management Agency, is rendering assistance to all the camps and even the host communities since 2009. The state government are doing their best, but it is really not enough because of the magnitude of the problems.
The United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs is at the heart of managing the crisis in the northeast alongside the government. However, they explained to me that there are issues that needs to be resolved.
The situation in the Northeast from a humanitarian point of view is very critical, and we are talking about a humanitarian crisis in the northeast of Nigeria. There are 15 million people who are directly affected by the violence triggered by Boko Haram. Out in the northeast of Nigeria, specifically Borno, Adamawa, Yobe, and Gombe. But the focus, the majority of the people affected are in Borno State. And at the moment, we are talking about 7 million people who need humanitarian assistance, including 4 million people who are food insecure, and they need food aid urgently.
A recent report released by the United Nations show about 4 million people in Nigeria needing food aid by September. Tell us more about this.
It's about actually two groups of people who have not been able to access food in adequate quantities due to a number of factors. One of them is the insecurity. A large number of people in the northeast of Nigeria have been displaced due to the conflict. We are talking about specifically 1.8 million people who have been displaced from their homes in the northeast of Nigeria as a result of the conflict. And 1.8 million people, the majority of them are farmers, have not been able to cultivate, to grow their food for over 2 years now. In addition to that, the climatic situations have also affected the food prices and food availability in the northeast of Nigeria.
Do you think the government is pushing hard in its efforts to tame this humanitarian situation we find ourselves in?
Government, specifically the army, is certainly pushing hard. And let me show you in figures how the situation has changed as a result of the military operations. At the beginning of this year, we in the UN and the international humanitarian community, where we're saying 7 million people are in need of humanitarian assistance. But we were only able to access and reach around 4 million people. And the remaining 3 million people were living in areas which were insecure or completely under the control of Boko Haram fighters. Since March of this year, the army started advancing and taking over a large number of LGAs in Borno State that were under the control of Boko Haram. As of now, we have started to access 800,000 people who were part of the 3 million people that were not accessible at the beginning of the year. They have become accessible as a result of the army expanding its control of LGAs in the northeast of Nigeria.
What do you mean by accessible?
They were not accessible. We could not travel and see them, meet them. We were not able to deliver assistance to them because of either they were under the control of Boko Haram or living in areas where there were military operations ongoing, and we were advised it was not safe to travel to these places.
So how do you really penetrate these areas in spite of this huge insecurity problem?
The challenge is quite huge, and probably you know that on the 28th of last month in July, a UN convoy that was coming back after delivering humanitarian assistance in Bama was attacked before reaching Kunduga. And luckily enough, no one was killed, but a number of people were injured and a number of vehicles were severely damaged. The security of access, the road travel is very, very insecure. And in many cases, we have to travel under the support or the escort of an armed, we have to travel under armed escort, unfortunately. But at the moment, we also brought in a helicopter, which is allowing us to travel by air and reach many of the places. Myself, over the last few weeks, have been able to reach Banki, Goza, Balka, Munguno, Bama several times, Dambua, Chibok, and this is new. We were not able to travel to these places as international humanitarian actors before. So the access have become possible, but it's not that safe. You travel and you expect an attack at any moment.